You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are going to discuss some of the good that came from this season. And before we get to the good, was there anything in your opinion that was good about this season? Leave a comment in the comments section below right now. I would love to hear your thoughts on it. I tried coming up with some good things and I was able to do it, but they're not exactly the greatest of good things to have. Get what I'm saying here? Kind of grasping at straws here to find some good from this season. But regardless, number one, they are playing their best basketball of the season right now as we enter the ACC Tournament. And that's ideal. For any college basketball team out there, you want to be playing your best basketball at this point of the season because it's great to look good in December and it's great to look good in January and even in the early parts of February. But let's be honest, it's all about this time of year. Conference tournament into the NCAA tournament. You want to be playing your best basketball at this time of the year, and Syracuse basketball is doing exactly that. They have played 8 games since that game against Duke. If I'm being nice, it was a game. They lost that one by 29 points. But since that moment, the Orange in the 8 games following the Duke one, they've only lost one of them by 10 or more points. Now, the reason why I bring that up is because one of the low marks of the Adrian Autry tenure so far, which is in its finale of its second year, I guess. But one of the hallmarks of it has been a lot of blowouts. When Syracuse basketball typically loses games, they get crushed. But since that Duke game, they've only lost one of those games by 10 plus points. And that was against Pitt, a team in which they had a double-digit lead in the second half, and they still managed to lose by 10 plus. But they did have a double-digit lead in that one. Furthermore, even though lately they have been blowing these big leads, right? We know what they are, the Pitt, Virginia Tech, SMU. At least Syracuse is showing that they're good enough to actually build a big lead. There have been multiple points over these past few games where Syracuse, you would hear it on the broadcast, they've opened up their largest lead in ACC play this season. It's happened multiple times. Now, the key going forward into the ACC tournament is very simple. You got to be able to hold on to these leads because now it's never good enough to blow a lead, but now if Syracuse blows a big lead, their season's over. There is no more tomorrow from here on out. It is a one-game season. But at least lately they have been showing that they are somewhat capable of being a good basketball team. They're just going to have to sustain it for 40-plus minutes. They are playing their best right now. Another good part of this season, again, I'm kind of grasping here, but they did not lose to any mid-major teams. And it wasn't necessarily pretty. Those first 3 games of the season, remember them? Lemoyne, Colgate, Youngstown State was a double overtime thriller. Thriller in air quotes. They beat them. They also nearly blew a game to Cornell, and they did beat UAlbany and Bucknell pretty easily. But overall, they avoided the major embarrassment of losing to mid-major teams. And one good thing of the Adrian Autry tenure so far in 2 years, and I'm a big Adrian Autry critic, don't get me wrong, but he's 11-0 against mid-major teams in his 2 seasons at Syracuse. I don't count the Chaminade game from a year ago because Chaminade isn't mid-major. Chaminade is a Division II basketball program that Syracuse played last year in Maui. But of the mid-major teams, Syracuse under Adrian Autry in his first 2 years, they have not lost. And hopefully going forward, not only do they continue not losing against the mid-major opponents, but also they start looking prettier against these mid-major opponents. If you recall, at the beginning of the season, the first net rankings came out, I want to say, right before the Tennessee game. It was about 5 or 6 games into the year, give or take. And Syracuse was ranked 175 in the net. Why do you think they were ranked so low in the net? Which, by the way, does matter when you're trying to make an NCAA tournament. But obviously, they're not going to make it at large. But at the time, you still kind of have that false hope that they had a chance. They barely beat the mid-majors, and that hurts your net and your KenPom significantly when you barely beat those inferior teams. So going forward, not only do they have to avoid the losses, because if you lose to those teams, it can quite literally end your season in November and early December, but also they're going to have to start beating a lot of these teams by 20-plus points next year. If they want to be a really good team and get back in the tournament, they're going to have to do what tournaments teams do, and that's blow out mid-majors. And the final good thing, I guess, from this season, and it's not really an accomplishment, but at least they made the ACC tournament. There was a real rock bottom, which we did not get to, thankfully. The rock bottom would have been missing the ACC tournament because for the first time ever, the conference expanded to 18 teams, and they're only taking 15 in the conference tournament, which means 3 teams are not playing any more basketball this season. Those 3 teams this year were Boston College, Miami, and NC State. Not in that particular order. Those are just the 3 teams that missed out on the conference tournament. I'm telling you, there's a whole new level of embarrassment when it comes to missing the conference tournament outright compared to Syracuse just having a really bad year, right? The brand has already been hurt bad enough, but missing the conference tournament is a step below. It's even worse. And so I'm glad that Syracuse at least found a way to win some critical games over the course of this season to where they have an opportunity to win 5 games in 5 days and pull off a miracle. Right? They beat Cal on the road, the second game in the California road trip. That was a big one that Syracuse had to win. Beating Boston College in triple overtime. No, it wasn't a pretty game, but they had to win it, and they got it done. And then NC State just a couple of weeks ago, which was essentially a do-or-die game. Because if Syracuse loses to NC State, they are both tied for the last spot in the conference. And just the momentum of that game, I don't know if Syracuse ends up making the conference tournament. I know the math ends up working out to where they would have, because I believe NC State just lost out and Syracuse beat Virginia, so it would have been enough. But the psyche of it, we don't really know what would have happened if Syracuse lost to NC State. And to their credit, not only did they beat NC State, they beat them down inside the Dome just a couple of weeks ago. So those were the good parts, I guess, of this season. They're playing their best basketball right now, which is good. They didn't lose a mid-major game. That's good. And at least they made the conference tournament, which is not much of an accomplishment, but it's better than not making the conference tournament.